Welcome to Chapter 11 of Her Love from Above. A Priceless Treasure. Tally's head hung low as she considered the latest walk-in appointment. When Miss Paige Lancaster had suggested that a fraudulent will and testament would be read on Friday, effectively giving away her inheritance, Tally was very interested in the case. It wasn't until she learned whose will and testament Miss Lancaster was referring to that she became sick to her stomach. Surely no one at Haven's Rest would stoop so low as to counter Bobby Joe's wishes. Even the idea of such a disgrace boggled her mind. It had been Tally who'd drawn up Bobby Joe's will 10 years earlier, and unless her wishes had changed drastically since that time, which she couldn't imagine being possible, then she was already certain about what her current will would state. If someone had created a fraudulent will, it could diminish Haven's Rest's effectiveness or force it to close. When Tally informed Miss Lancaster that she could not represent her due to a conflict of interest, the pushy lady had refused to take no for an answer. Finally, after quite a loud and disturbing discussion, she directed Miss Lancaster to an investigator friend. She wanted Bobby Joe's wishes upheld, and this investigator was the best in the area. If Miss Lancaster were correct in her assessment of the situation, the retired detective would be able to verify it in quick fashion. Tally stared at the phone sitting on her desk. It would be unethical to warn Buck or Jenny about what was coming, and doing so would get her disbarred. But even if informing them of the situation had been legal, it would still be morally wrong. Besides, there was no need to share Miss Lancaster's plans. If Bobby Joe's will and testament were fraudulent, whoever forged it should be held accountable. And if that were the case, the court would revert to the original documents she still possessed from years earlier. No one knew about her copy because that's what Bobby Joe wanted, and she was now thankful that her once protector and good friend had insisted she keep the original will and testament in her possession in case any natural or unnatural disaster arose after her death. She considered that for a moment. Bobby Joe knew her relatives, so perhaps she suspected something like this might happen. Tally breathed out slowly. Knowing her hands were legally bound brought some comfort to her heart. "Please, God," she prayed, "don't let Buck or Jenny be behind this if it really is a fake will." Bobby Joe poured her sweat, blood, and tears into that place for over half her life. Please mind it for her until your will is accomplished. Tally stared at the large painting of Bobby Joe and herself standing in front of Haven's Rest, which had been created from a photo taken immediately after a snowstorm. The lodge's logs were a moist-looking brown, a direct contrast to the sparkling snow now sprinkled on their upper edges. The roof, ground, and trees surrounding it were snow-capped and glistening white. It was the most beautiful painting she had ever seen, and it was painted by a friend of hers who was once a fellow resident of Haven's Rest. She'd received it via special delivery shortly before her friend's disappearance. Unfortunately, this friend, Peggy, was persuaded to return to her husband after he supposedly found religion. 2 years later, Tally could no longer reach her. She'd tried calling her multiple times to thank her for the snowy painting of Haven's Rest, but her husband, Damien, always intercepted those calls, claiming she either wasn't home or was busy. Finally, after weeks with no word from her, she reported Peggy's disappearance to the police. The detective who investigated the report had believed Tally, but the district attorney chose not to prosecute Damien due to a lack of evidence. When Peggy's family begged for something to be done, the district attorney again refused, claiming that without a body, there was a possibility he might lose the case. Therefore, he refused to even try. Several months later, two hikers veering off a designated mountain trail in search of adventure found more excitement than they desired when they discovered the remains of Peggy's body, which at that time was only bones and mutilated clothing. Tally's eyes filled with tears as she thought of her dead friend. She wished Peggy had listened to Bobby Joe that regretful day so long ago. Peggy knew that abusers rarely changed, yet she'd allowed herself to be persuaded by her sister to return home, and, as a result, a beautiful life was snuffed out. Tally glanced at the words printed on the frame, "A time to remember." Peggy's signature was disguised in the painting above those words. She reached up and ran her fingers over the scripted signature. Peggy must have suspected her time was coming to an end when she signed the painting because she used her maiden name. She often wondered if that was Peggy's way of letting her know she was fleeing Damien again, or that she suspected she would soon be dead and was trying to hint that he might not have changed as promised. Maybe it was her secret cry for help. Tally shivered at the thought of what Peggy had suffered. After her body was found and identified, the district attorney had finally prosecuted Damien, but that did not bring Peggy back. Tally again considered the Haven's Rest ministry. Such a priceless treasure, she whispered to herself. Had it not been for Bobby Joe and her ministry, Tally guessed that her own body would currently be buried beneath a concrete slab in some parking lot. After all, that's what her wealthy husband had promised would happen should she ever leave him. Because of Bobby Joe, even though he had plenty of money to buy information, Tally had remained hidden for over a decade. She recently heard through the grapevine that her husband was killed in an accident, but she didn't call anyone in her hometown to gain clarification. For one thing, sending out a false report about his death was the kind of deceitful ploy he would use to trick her into revealing her whereabouts. She would be extremely wealthy if the information were accurate, but the money wasn't worth the risk. He could take it to hell with him for all she cared. Tally marveled as she examined the painting again. Upon entering her office, it was usually the first thing people saw. Yet Miss Paige Lancaster and her daughter never even noticed it. They were related to Bobby Joe. They knew all about the Haven's Rest ministry and no doubt had visited countless times through the years, yet they'd failed to notice the painting. How did they miss such an enormous and magnificent painting of a ministry someone in their family built? She chuckled aloud. "I will go tonight as planned, and I will speak like I know nothing of what Miss Lancaster said. There's no need to get upset until the fat lady sings." "Did you hear what I said?" Paige fumed as she focused on Madison. "I asked you that question twice, and you still haven't answered." "I'm sorry, Mom," Madison responded, pulling her hair behind her ear, "but it's been a really rough day. It's hard to keep Johnny's cheating off my mind, and with Jenny, of all things." She produced a quiver in her voice. "For pity's sake. I love him so much, I can't believe he's doing this to me again, right in front of everyone." Madison's emotion sounded genuine, although it wasn't for the reason she gave. Earlier that day, while Paige was speaking with the retired detective, Madison had called Jenny's ex-husband. He seemed like a very nice man, yet she was still jittery when she first started talking. As soon as he figured out who she was and why she was calling, he turned from sounding formal to all ears. In the end, he guaranteed her that she would never again need to worry about Jenny or her cheating and abusive husband. He spoke softly as he gave this assurance, which seemed to inundate his words with intense threat, and there was no doubt of his intentions when she hung up the phone. Jenny and Johnny would soon be dead. Jenny would be collateral damage, but she'd earned her fate when she came after Madison's property. Johnny, well, he signed his death warrant when he refused to obey her and went fishing. She was confident he would file for divorce soon, and 3 years of maintenance wouldn't keep her going nearly long enough, but, she reasoned, his life insurance policy would. She turned her face away from her mother as she smiled. Cat collar or not, she would be set for years. He's been cheating on you since before you were married, Paige reminded, while turning the steering wheel more forcefully than necessary, revealing her intense anger. The result was a slight slide as they swerved onto the dirt road leading to Haven's Rest. I told you years ago you should leave him. He claims to be working 80 hours a week, and we both know that's bull. You'd never need to borrow money from me if he worked all those hours. What else could he be doing except having affairs and spending it on other women? She huffed dramatically while swiping her hand through the air in frustration. It's about time you teach him a lesson. Send him packing. Let him do his own cooking, cleaning, and laundry for a change. You are not his slave. Madison fought back a smile. She never cooked, paid someone else to clean the house, and had Johnny take her laundry to and from the laundromat. On the other hand, he machine washed the few clothes he possessed. After all, as she reminded him frequently, there was no need to pay for filthy work clothes to be professionally cleaned, and she certainly wasn't doing his laundry. Her smile grew, because the lies she had fed her mother over the past 5 years were proving effective. Not only did her mother believe Johnny to be a conniving and lazy womanizer, she also painted Madison as the victim. To hide her growing smile, Madison turned toward the window. Her mother was so gullible. She had never understood how someone so smart could be so stupid. Claire admired the enormous aspen trees from the cabin's large living room window. They were picturesque, as were the blue spruces and wildflowers. She breathed in deeply, then wiped the moisture from her cheeks. She didn't want her new friend to see her crying when she returned with her veggie starts, but she was having serious trouble containing her emotions. Earlier that morning, after returning from their trek to the creek, they discovered Ava's boxes waiting outside the cabin door. To Claire's surprise, there were only 4, and those 4 were rather small. When Claire and Ava began unpacking them, Claire felt terrible about how little Ava owned, but as they unwrapped each item, she realized those few salvage possessions were of great value to Ava, representing her life before Ed, and each item held a special meaning. Together, she and Ava searched for the ideal location to showcase each prized possession. As they did, and without being prompted, Ava gave a short synopsis of everything. Those 4 boxes representing 26 years of her life were all she needed. Claire thought back to the first small bag she'd pulled from the box, containing several pieces of a broken ceramic doll. If the pieces had been together, she guessed the doll would have been about 4 to 5 inches tall. Claire loved antiques, so when she saw the doll's facial features and coloring, she immediately recognized it as an antique, possibly close to 200 years old. "This must have broken when your friend was packing," she regretfully informed Ava, sincerely hoping they found no other ruined treasures among the boxes. After seeing how little Ava possessed, even one broken item saddened her heart. "No," Ava countered. "It was broke the first year of my marriage. It originally belonged to my great-grandmother. When Ed broke it, I gathered the pieces, hoping I might one day glue them back together. I don't suppose that day will ever come." "An accident?" Claire questioned. "No, he got angry at me for putting on the wrong dress. As punishment for my disobedience, he picked it up and dropped it on our hardwood floor. He would have been furious had he known I kept the pieces." Claire's mouth fell open, but Ava did not notice as she continued. "He always chose what I was to wear when we went out," she explained. "My father gave me money for my birthday that year, and I wanted to surprise Ed with a new dress. I went to our neighbor's house and called a friend, the only friend he had failed to run off, and we went on a secret shopping trip. I dolled myself up, makeup and all. I was so excited about surprising him. But when he saw me, he said I looked like a harlot." She focused her attention on Claire and said, "I didn't. The dress was beautiful and conservative, but that didn't matter. All that mattered was that I purchased it without his permission and didn't wear the one he laid out for me." Ava's face was sad as she examined the bag of broken pieces. "That was my grandmother's doll when she was young. I know it belonged to her mother before her, and I think it belonged to her mother's grandmother before that, but I don't know for sure. If I can get it repaired, I may take it to an antique dealer and see if they can date it. Anyway, when my grandmother passed away, it became my mom's. When I was 11 years old, my mom passed away. At that point, it became mine. It's the only belonging of my mom's that Margie, my stepmom, didn't throw away when she and my dad were married. And that's only because it was in my room, and she didn't know its history." Her chest heaved. "Ed knew how important it was to me, so he used it as punishment for my betrayal." She shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe I should have given him the money instead of buying the dress." "Why?" Claire demanded, anger in her voice as she brushed a wayward curl from her face. "It was your birthday money. You should be able to spend your birthday money on whatever you want." "Ed always said we were short on funds. At least, that's what he claimed. He never bought me gifts. If someone gave me money for any special occasion, I was required to hand it to him so he could pay our bills." She hesitated. "You know, I was required to give him my birthday money to pay bills, but he spent thousands on those stupid little airplanes and helicopters that fly over people's houses, and even more on his exotic animals." She chuckled, but her face contained no genuine amusement. "Our home constantly smelled like sewage because he refused to clean their cages. Eventually, the smell got so bad that I cleaned them myself. That scared the bejeegers out of me, especially when I had to clean the rattlesnake cage." "Rattlesnake?" Claire bellowed. "That's crazy, not to mention illegal." "I know," Ava replied, "but he didn't seem to care. That stupid snake was his pride and joy, probably because it was illegal. Anyway, the cages didn't clean themselves, so if I wanted to be able to breathe, I had to clean them. I couldn't stay inside the house day and night with that stench. It was horrid. But no matter how much I cleaned, the stench never completely disappeared. You can't make a barn smell like a flower bed." Ava glanced at Claire. "Now me? I never got a gift. Well, not never," she corrected. "Ed gave me several guns, knives, and a great fishing pole. At least, it was supposed to be a great fishing pole. I never got to use it, so I don't actually know. And those guns and knives were all on his I want list. I learned the hard way to smile, say thank you, act like any gift he gave me was a big deal, and then leave the gun or whatever he bought where he could find it. Eventually, they were added to his collection." "He bought himself gifts for your birthday?" Claire clenched her hands in anger. And Christmas, Ava added. I finally began telling my dad what I wanted so he would buy it instead of giving me money. Otherwise, I didn't get anything. Even then, if there was any indication of where it was purchased, I was forced to return it for a refund. If it was not returnable, then within a year he'd find a way to break or destroy it. Ava laughed as she carefully laid the bag of broken doll pieces aside. And those exotic creatures, not one of them liked him. They loved me, but they hated him. It used to make him so angry. I got several serious bruises and 2 fractured ribs because of it. And somehow, she appeared in deep thought as she continued, somehow the cockroaches he fed to his lizards magically escaped their sealed box at night. Only night, mind you, and made their way straight to our bedroom. She once again tucked some loose strands of blonde hair behind her ear and emphasized, nowhere else, just our bedroom, and only to my side of the bed. They'd always end up on my face or neck, never on him, just on me. And every time I woke up screaming with one of them crawling on me, he'd be leaning up in bed watching in amusement. She turned and gave Claire her full attention. Doesn't that sound a bit suspicious to you? He put them on you, Claire voiced with assurance. Ava nodded. I never had any proof, of course, but it didn't matter. There was nothing I could do about it. He'd laugh and say, oh, it must have escaped from the box. I mentioned once that it sure seemed suspicious how they always escaped at night and made a beeline straight to me. She groaned. I never had the nerve to suggest my suspicions again. It wasn't worth the pain. Oh, Ava, Claire recalled saying, I'm so sorry. No one should be forced to live in that kind of situation. Ava merely shrugged as though brushing off the memories, although tears filled her eyes. That was nothing, not compared to... She didn't finish her statement, and Claire didn't feel it appropriate to prompt her to continue. If there was something she wanted to share, she would eventually share it. As Claire thought back to that morning, she felt for the bag containing the broken doll pieces resting inside her jacket pocket. She would find an antique dealer or someone who could glue Ava's doll back together and make it look as good as new. In this, Ed was not going to win. Then, after it was restored to its original state, she might even snap a picture and have a friend in Florida mail it to Ed with an anonymous note of defiance. Maybe. She'd have to think about that for a while. Claire's eyes traveled to the set of books resting on the bookcase built into the wall across from the fireplace. Most of them were prime candidates for a garage sale or fire kindling. After all, Louis L'Amour westerns were everywhere and could be purchased for a dime a dozen. Yet to Ava, these were priceless. Had Ed known this, he would have used them as ammo to punish her for some imagined slight as well. Claire's eyes closed in thought as she recalled her new friend discussing how 1, 2, 3, or 4 generations of signatures graced their pages. Avalon, Ava's great-grandmother, signed her name in a lovely script on the front inside cover of over 3/4 of the books. Ava's grandfather's signature adorned the same pages as his mother's. The only books in his collection missing her signature were the ones purchased after her death. She wondered if Avalon had given her son his love for reading. Ava's father's signature was scribbled on every book in his father's collection, shy of 2. And now, Ava's nearly perfect script was showcased beneath her father's scribbled name. Claire wondered if great-grandmother Avalon could have guessed when she signed the original books nearly 100 years earlier that they would become a priceless treasure to her great-granddaughter. As Ava shared the story of the books with Claire, she commented that she hoped her father would one day be able to read the 2 books missing his signature. That hurt Claire's heart. No person should be able to control another individual's life so thoroughly that they divide loved ones for safety's sake. Ava explained that when the books first disappeared from the library shelf 6 years earlier, Ed had questioned her about them. She lied and said her friend had taken them to a nearby thrift store because they were taking too much of the library space for books with no real value. He was surprised, but did not indicate that he thought she was lying. Had he discovered their hiding place in the attic, she would have paid dearly. Claire moved to the bookcase, pulled out one of the books, and opened the front cover. 4 signatures were present inside. She glanced at the check marks following the signatures. Ava said that each time someone reread a book, they would place a check mark behind their name. She smiled as she examined the 3 check marks behind Ava's name, which was the same number of check marks beside her great-grandmother's name. "Thank you, Lord," she softly whispered, "for sparing these priceless treasures." After Ava and Claire finished unpacking the boxes, Claire questioned why she didn't have her friend gather more items from the house. Ava quickly explained that she wanted nothing that reminded her of Ed or the life she was leaving behind. Her baby book, the one she'd rescued from the trash pile where her stepmother had thrown it years earlier, and a few albums from her childhood, rescued from the same trash pile, along with some trinkets given to her by friends, were all she wanted. Ava informed her that these 4 small boxes survived because she'd hidden them in the attic, where Ed never ventured. Otherwise, he would have destroyed them like he did everything else of value to her, such as her graduating caps and gowns, the trophies from her childhood years, and the few items she inherited from her grandparents. Even her certified cosmetologist diploma, which she earned at a tremendous emotional and physical cost, was ripped apart and stuffed inside a spittoon bottle the morning after her graduation. Ava said that Ed wholeheartedly favored her getting the degree so she would not be such a huge financial burden to him, but that all changed the week of finals when he learned she would graduate at the top of her class and already had a job lined up at the school's parlor. His entire persona morphed upon hearing this news. That evening, he gave Ava's car to a homeless man loitering on the street corner. She knew why he did it. If she couldn't get to class, she couldn't graduate. If she didn't graduate, she wouldn't get a job. If she didn't get the job, she would have no means of financial support. Ed wanted her entirely under his thumb, and he wanted her to fail so he could mock her failure and continue his projection of her being worthless and a financial burden. Claire marveled at how Ed was okay with her earning the degree as long as it was useless. But when it was elevated from a mere certificate to something of value, it was no longer acceptable. Just like her other keepsakes, it had to be destroyed. When Ed learned that her lone friend had picked her up and driven her to class so she could complete the degree, he was furious. She did graduate at the top of her class, although she missed the graduation ceremony. That evening, while her friends were honored for their accomplishments, she received one of the worst beatings of her life. The next morning, with Ed hovering over her shoulder, she called the cosmetology school and informed them that she would not be accepting the job, and she wasn't allowed to tell them why she had changed her mind. Claire wiped the tears from her face as she replayed her friend's story. Ava was such a sweet and giving person that she had trouble imagining anyone treating her in such a degrading and vicious manner. Teasel lowered to her side. "She's safe from him now," he consoled. "She needs to share her story for her own sanity and to help others, but then she needs to move on." Claire again wiped away her tears. "It's okay to cry," he soothed. "Just try not to cry in front of Ava. Right now, she needs your strength more than your pity." Claire took in a deep breath as she again wiped away the tears. When her vision cleared enough to see, she took in the complete atmosphere of the newly decorated cabin. It was perfect, Ava's little paradise, showcasing the part of her life she wanted to remember. Her kitchen was furnished with all the essentials for cooking, and there was even an apron hanging in the pantry that read, "My God provides all my needs, even if I can't cook." The bathroom cabinets were also fully furnished. Washcloths and towels matching the curtains were carefully folded and tucked into the appropriate places, and a gift basket filled with bathroom supplies, various shampoos and soaps, feminine razors, clean cleansers, perfumed bath salts, and moisturizers sat on the counter next to the sink. Ava's eyes had brightened when she saw the gift basket, because Ed never permitted her to waste money on unnecessary personal items, which meant that she had not bathed in perfumed bath oils in 7 years. "She's coming," Teasel advised. "Cheer up and be supportive." Ava's sweet voice sounded outside the cabin, so Claire quickly rubbed the remaining moisture from her face and forced a smile. She returned the treasured book to the shelf and stepped across the living room to the door where Ava was approaching, carrying a tray of small veggie plants. Claire moved to allow her entrance, then watched as her new friend gently placed the plants on the kitchen table. "Your hot tea is finished," Claire informed as she grabbed a steaming mug from the kitchen countertop. When she turned to hand it to Ava, the pocket of her sweats caught on the cabinet handle, jerking her to an abrupt stop. She yelped as hot liquid saturated her hand. "I'm so sorry," she spat as she hurriedly placed the cup back on the counter and drowned her hand beneath the faucet's cold water. "Unbelievable," she fussed to herself. "Are you okay?" Ava asked in a panicked voice. "Yes," Claire answered. "It just burns a little. I wasn't expecting the cabinet to grab my—" "There's some WD-40 in the pantry," Ava blurted out, interrupting Claire's statement. "What?" Claire frowned as she watched Ava hurry toward the pantry. "I saw it earlier. It works wonders on burns," Ava explained. "Stops the burning almost instantly." She returned, pulled Claire's hand from beneath the faucet, and drenched it with the spray. She then dabbed off the water with a paper towel and resprayed the burned area. Claire gaped at her red hand. "WD-40? She uttered. "It's a miracle worker." "Yes, I can see I can hardly feel the burning." Ava noticed Claire's red eyes and wrongly assumed they were teared up because of the burn. "I can get Charlie if your hand needs more attention." Claire shook her head. "No," she calmly replied. "I'm fine. It doesn't hurt much. Neat trick. I may need to invest in the WD-40 factory. How'd you learn that?" "My dad's a mechanic," Ava explained while grabbing a dish rag to clean the hot tea off the floor. "He taught me that trick. I always have at least one can on hand in case of an emergency. If you're sure you're okay, we can go sit down for a while. Buck said they're almost finished with the greenhouse. He'll come get us when they're done." "Sure," Claire agreed. Ava grabbed her half-filled mug from the counter, wiped off the outer part, and then headed toward the couch with an expression of contentment and awe. Only a few days earlier, she would have been thankful had an accident taken her life. Now, she felt like she was living in a dream. Nahath, who had spent much of the morning listening to the ladies' talk, eased his way to her side. He'd been advised about the worst of Ava's story before arriving at Haven's Rest, and as far as he was aware, she had not yet voiced the whole truth to anyone, not even her father. All he knew was that she had suffered a miscarriage, but he had no idea of the cause of that miscarriage. "Go ahead," Nahath gently urged. "Tell her. She's easy to talk with, and she cares. Besides, she needs to know your story so she can better understand the residents who come here to heal. Tell her what Ed did to you." Ava placed her mug on the nearby coffee table, pulled her long hair from her face, and began French braiding it, all in an effort to delay talking. She felt guilty for dampening Claire's morning with her tales of woe, although she was thankful for her listening ears. Clair was easy to talk with and didn't seem to judge. Never once had she said, "Then why did you marry him?" or "Why did you stay so long?" Ava suddenly realized that she had shared more with Clair in the past few hours than she had with anyone in years, and Clair was still there. She had not turned and walked away like her stepmother, nor had she hinted that it was Ava's fault by asking what she did to set Ed off. She merely listened. Ava considered this. Perhaps if she shared her story with Clair, it would be easier to share with the others. "Go ahead, Ava," Nahath again encouraged. "She doesn't judge. She hasn't blamed the abuse on you, nor has she criticized you for staying with him for so long. No, she doesn't fully understand, but she understands that she doesn't understand. That's enormous." Ava took in a deep breath and watched as Clair curled up her legs in the chair and snuggled beneath her fuzzy bunny blanket. She was amused by the sight, because the bunny's reddish fur matched Claire's auburn red hair perfectly. "Just start talking," Nahath urged. "Once you start talking, the story will flow naturally." "I got pregnant last year," Ava suddenly blurted out, not knowing where else to start. Clair was startled by Ava's abrupt admission because they had left the personal talk behind in favor of a friendly visit an hour earlier. Besides, she hadn't known that Ava had a child, but perhaps she was mistaken. After all, she didn't know anything about Ava besides what Ava had already shared. "Just let her talk as she wants," Nahath suggested. "Be her listening ear." Clair sat quietly and waited for her friend to continue. If Ava chose to say more, she would listen. If she decided not to explain her statement, the conversation would end there. She would not push her either way. Ava swallowed hard as she stared at the teacup once again in her hand. She felt compelled to tell someone her story. No one knew the complete truth, not even her only remaining friend, the one Ed had been unable to run off. "Ed claimed he suffered from nightmares in his sleep," she began, but then she paused before continuing. "About twice a year, he would punch me during one of those nightmares, usually in my shoulder or back. Last year, when I was 5 months pregnant, he punched me in the stomach." Her eyes now glistened and her lips quivered. "It was worse than any pain I'd ever experienced, and the baby tossed and turned for over an hour. I knew she was hurt, so I begged him to take me to the hospital, but he refused. He didn't want a baby girl, and it was an accident that I got pregnant in the first place. The next evening, against his wishes, I built a wall of pillows between us in the center of the bed. 2:00 that morning, I awoke in severe pain, unable to breathe or think. The pain was so bad that it made me vomit right there in bed." Her eyebrows crinkled as she said, He was furious because he had to get out of bed so I could change the sheets. Silence enveloped the room for several minutes before Ava continued. He claimed it was another nightmare, but I knew better. When I first opened my eyes, I saw his face in the moonlight. It was leaning over my pillow wall, staring at me with a look of satisfaction. Ava's voice cracked as she continued. The baby was sluggish for the first few hours, but then she stopped moving altogether. Even when I pushed on my stomach, I couldn't get her to move. A tear trickled down her cheek. I pleaded for Ed to take me to the hospital, but again, he refused. He began mocking me, saying that I run to the ER every time I stub my toe. An hour later, I began bleeding, and it felt like my stomach was falling out. He still wouldn't take me to the hospital. 2 days passed before. Ava's voice faltered, and she was unable to finish her story, but she didn't need to. Claire already knew the ending. I should have left him years ago, Ava confessed a few minutes later as she wiped the moisture from her face. I should never have considered bringing a baby into this world with him as the father. I should have left as soon as I got pregnant. It's my fault. I killed my... Stop, Claire firmly rebuked. No, Ava, no. You can't do this. You can't blame yourself, nor can you undo the past. You did what you felt was right at the time. The Lord brought you to Haven's Rest for a purpose, and it wasn't so you could blame yourself for Ed's wickedness. God wants to heal you, but you've got to let him. You've got to let go of your past and move forward. Buck stuck his head through the greenhouse door at the end of Claire's statement. His shoes were covered with dirt, and a trail of dust lightly flaked from his body. A funny sheen seemed to envelope his frame in the room's light, causing Claire and Ava to smile at each other. He looked like the product of someone who had escaped a tomb. Good grief, Claire blurted. What did you do? Shower in dirt? It feels like it, Buck mused with a grin. We're finished. Would you ladies like to take a look? Yes, Ava excitedly squealed while standing. With the account of her story seemingly forgotten, she laid her mug aside, grabbed a tissue, blew her nose, and then darted for the door. Claire followed closely behind, but she couldn't sweep the image of Ava's grief from her mind. Whatever happened in the next few days, she determined right then and there that she would fight with everything she had to ensure Auntie's ministry continued. People like Ava needed a place to recover from the wounds on their bodies, the anguish buried in their hearts, and the pain caused by the evil of others. Ava froze in amazement when she stepped from the kitchen into the greenhouse. She had purposely refrained from taking a peek inside the building until it was finished, because she wanted to experience the surprise of receiving a special gift. With it being Buck and Jenny's design, she expected it to be nice, but she had no idea it would be this nice. Scanning the area, her eyes grew large with wonder. Wow, she exclaimed. Jenny had something to do with this, Claire said while soaking in the scene. I'd bet my life on it. Buck grinned. Of course she did. I'd never come up with something like this on my own. It's perfect, Ava squealed. Absolutely perfect. Let me show you around. Buck pointed toward the 5 rows of raised beds, each at various heights. They're built this way so your tall plants can go on the lower beds, and there's still plenty of soil to nourish them. We can add more shelving layers to the shorter beds if you want for more growing space. Some ladies do, some don't. That's up to you. Ava clasped her hands together beneath her chin. Now, over here, he pointed toward some shelves filled with bags of fertilizer and other plant nutrients. Those are the nutrients and supplies you'll need to stake them up and keep them healthy. Besides the starts Jenny gave you, We have a boatload of organic seeds at the lodge that you can pick from. They're descendants of the plants Auntie grew the first year she started this place. If there's something else you need, let me know, and I'll gladly get it for you. Buck walked toward the west corner of the room, dirt sprinkling the ground in his wake. Over here are some small odorless compost boxes. You can put coffee grounds, eggshells, or whatever in them. We also have outdoor compost piles, but most residents have found these to be enough. If you need fertilizer from one of the outdoor piles, let me know and I'll haul it over here for you. Charlie moved toward the other corner and rolled out one of several growing shelves stacked above and below each other. They were set 2 feet apart, leaving just enough room for air to circulate. Horticulture grow lights were attached beneath each shelf, providing the necessary lighting. "We found those growing shelves to be priceless," Buck said. "Any short plant can be grown there, and they're just plants, so they don't get claustrophobic. You could grow enough herbs to supply an army on these." Claire looked at the lights on the ceiling. They were all horticultural grow lights, which would keep the plants well lit during the winter months, and a ceiling hung amidst them to assist with pollination. Her attention was drawn from the fan to Buck as he pointed toward a watering system. You can set the water to spray as little or as much as you want on each individual bed, so you should never need to water anything manually. And he indicated a water hose dangling from a hanger attached to the wall. There's no need to sweep the floor because you can just use that hose to wash away the soil that falls to the concrete. He circled to the third corner and unlocked 2 latches on the lowest wooden panel resting on the concrete floor. After he opened the latches, he lifted the board to expose the outside. "We've put this in as a drainage system, so you'll have somewhere to wash the dirt. The concrete tilts slightly downward, meaning everything will automatically wash in this direction. Just lift this lid and start spraying, but you'd better remember to lock it back when you're finished. A few animals, including a small bear, have snuck in through these openings over the years." "Claire likes bears," Charlie teased with a wink. "A bear door?" Claire mused. "I met some bears at our mountain lake a few years back, and it wasn't fun. I'd keep that door locked all the time." She glanced at Ava, expecting to see a huge smile. But instead of smiling, Ava was struggling to hold it together. Buck grinned when he saw Ava's response, which was how most of their residents looked after seeing the greenhouse, at least those who loved gardening. Most didn't get the normal necessities of life, so items that weren't necessities were a rare commodity. A greenhouse like this was something they would never have dreamed possible. With minimal work, they could have fresh vegetables and herbs year-round. And if they were like Ava, they could spend as much time as they wanted in the greenhouse and grow their own flowers. Some Havens Rest residents had even created businesses selling flowers to local flower shops. "Ed wouldn't let me have a garden," Ava finally said. "He promised me one before we were married, but then he changed his mind. Now, I have the best garden ever, and it's year-round." Her eyes sparkled as she looked at Buck. "I don't know how to thank you. This is so perfect." Buck stuck his hands inside his dust-covered pockets. "Don't thank me. I just work here. Auntie made all this possible." "With help from you and Jenny," Charlie added. "She couldn't have done it alone." "With help from a lot of people," Buck corrected. "Yes," Claire agreed. "And this ministry is going to continue for many years to come. I don't care what we've got to do to keep it running."